Hello, and welcome to New Beginnings Start Today, the podcast for people who want to grow deeper in their faith in the Lord. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Keffer, a minister, licensed clinical pastoral counselor here in Roanoke, Virginia, and I have a passion to help people live their faith. Today, we are going to talk about true justice comes from God, and how you can find solace in the fact that God is going to bring his justice to every unjust deed that takes place. Let's look at this. Many of us hear about things that take place and wonder if there is going to be justice given to those who are affected by these horrific acts. There are so many things that we are seeing happening in our government on the national, state, and local levels that we wonder how they can be doing the things they are doing and getting seemingly away with it. I just recently read about a huge company that is under investigation for criminal charges, and the CEO of the company sat before a congressional hearing and downplayed the seriousness of the charges as though nothing was going to come of the investigations. There needs to be justice given to the families whose lives were drastically affected by the actions of this company. King Solomon tells us about God's justice when he wrote, "When justice is done, it brings joy to the righteous, but terror to the evildoers." Proverbs 21 and verse 15. I truly believe this truth that Solomon shared with God's people centuries ago when there was so much injustice going on in his day. He had the ominous responsibility to listen to cases that were brought before him and make a ruling. His rulings were always just because of how God had anointed him as king after his father's death, King David. When we see justice given in a situation, and it does bring us joy, the guilty party or parties that were given the judgment can have a sense of terror come upon them because they know that they are going to suffer punishment for their acts. But the fact remains that there are so many things that go on in our society today that are wrong, and it seems that these wrongs are not addressed to where there is going to be justice given to those who commit those wrongful acts. This causes a huge distrust in the justice system by so many people. I see news headlines every week about a shooting in a section of town that I live in. I say to my wife, "There's been another shooting in the war zone." The reporters talk about how there were victims found dead at the scene or died on the way to the hospital. Then at the end of the report, I read, "No suspects have been arrested." The police tells us that there is no immediate danger in the neighborhood any longer. So many times this is the last we hear of these murders in our community, and thus we never know if the perpetrators were ever caught and brought to justice for their crimes of murder. This is just one example of evil that goes on in our communities, and maybe the ones that commit these crimes are never caught. But I want you to know they cannot and will not escape the justice that God is going to bring upon them. They will feel his anger toward their evil. Let me take you to what I am seeing happening in the family today and how injustice is affecting so many families in such negative ways. I am thinking of the many families I have counseled over the years where one or more of the children believed that their parents played favoritism to one of their siblings. I have been told stories where one of the siblings had their college education paid for, but the other siblings had to pay for their own. Others talked about how they had a sibling given a new automobile for graduation, and the other siblings had no help when they had to buy their car. I have had many adults talk to me about how their parents enabled one of their siblings' drug addiction by bailing them out of jail when they were arrested for possessions of illegal drugs. Or one of the siblings was given a large sum of money to keep them from losing their house or car, even getting them out of gambling debts. I have been told of how my client felt cheated in the inheritance that their parents gave at their death. The majority of what was left went to one of the siblings, and a token was given to the rest of the children. Then we look at how so many have been affected by the emotional neglect they had growing up. I have had so many adult children tell me, Dr. Keffer, I was never hugged or told I love you growing up, but my sister or my brother or my other siblings were always shown affection and were told that my parents loved them. Where is the justice in that? The effect of this emotional neglect and often can and often does go with this person for the rest of their lives. The Apostle Paul gives great insight into how healthy families should function and produce a productive outcome for the family when he wrote, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the rearing or the training and the instruction of the Lord." Ephesians 6, 1 through 4. These admonitions were written about as early as Deuteronomy 5:16, when Moses was laying out the guidelines for God's people to live by coming out of their slavery in Egypt. I counseled a young man who knew firsthand what it was to have a father who worked at exasperating him from the time that he was very young. Dad would have conversations with him about the things that he wanted him to do. And when the son did what was asked of him, he was always berated. And this behavior on the part of his father has left scars on this young man. His siblings felt that there was no justice in what had happened to them, but they knew that their dad was going to have to answer to God for his treatment of them. Families today must adopt this model of behavior with each other that Paul is talking about, so that there will be justice in how parents raise their children, and in turn, children will feel loved and nurtured, respecting their parents, which grows healthy families for today and for tomorrow. Justice in the family unit begins when parents and their children are obedient to God's will for their lives on a daily basis. The need to see justice in our world is in our DNA. This is true because remember, we were created in God's image, and the justice he provides and demands was in place even before we were created. God is always showing his people his capacity to forgive our sins in so many ways. The prophet Micah shares with us this truth when he wrote, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly before your God." Micah 6 and verse 8. This prophet is pointing out to God's people what he requires of us. Back in the 7th century, God's people were asking, what did God require of them to see his justice? Listen to their questions. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams and 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Micah 6, verses 6 and 7. These questions asked by God's people back then are the same kind of questions people are asking today. We have always asked, when is enough enough, God? So many think that they can never please him because he is too strict. Micah tells us that God has told us what is good, to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Are you hearing this? God has told us what is good. And if we live in that goodness, we will see God's justice in our world because we will truly believe that he wants the very best for us. After all, he has given us his very best, his Son, Jesus Christ. The next time you wonder where the justice is in something that you see, you read, or you hear, I want you to apply this promise to your mind and trust that God is giving his justice to the world in ways that we may not be able to reason, but it is there when King David wrote, "For the Lord loves the just and will not forsake his faithful ones." Psalms 37 and verse 28. We cannot allow all the evil that we see going on in our world to discourage us from living with the conviction that no matter what Satan throws at us, we will strive to do what is right all the time. That can be very demanding many times, but when those around us see that we are going to do what is right in the situation, it sends a message to them that our world, that we believe that ultimately God is going to render justice to our world, and we are going to live in the wonder of his love. I live with the conviction that no matter what I see to be unjust, that God is going to make it right because he is truly a just God that rewards my faithfulness. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I want to invite you to contact me and share with me how you are seeing God's justice at work in your life. Answer this question. How are you seeing your daily living being blessed by God's care for you? If you are seeing this on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and the like button. Also, click on the share button and share it with all your friends. That would be so helpful to me. Tell me about other issues that you would like me to address by leaving your comments, and you can email me at drdouglaskeffer@gmail.com. I also encourage you to get a copy of my book, New Beginnings Start Today with God, on my website at www.drdouglaskeffer.com. Click on the link below. Until next time, God bless each of you.